One Piece Chapter 1114, The Wings of Icarus, details the continuation of VegaPunk's broadcasts. The chapter title relates to Greek mythology and is about a god who had wings made of wax that didn't heed the word of his father and eventually flew too close to the sun, melting his wings and thus causing the god to fall into the sea. This is extremely symbolic of the events that are happening with VegaPunk, which we will detail later on in this review. In quick summary, I thought this chapter did a really good job in providing the reader, us, insight into the various perspectives of the different characters in One Piece. And so having said that, how I'm going to do this chapter review, I'm going to break it up into 4 parts. First, I'll quickly go over the cover story. Then I'm going to talk about 3 different affiliations and their various perspectives and actions that occur in the chapter. So, starting off with the cover story, we have an assignment for Yamato to enshrine the sword of Yasui. We see the various parts of Wano that assumingly Yamato will have to travel through, and I think at various stages of the travel she will either gain some insightful information based from an interaction with a different character. Off the top of my head, some of the characters I think she might run into is Tengu-sama, of course, Momonosuke's grandfather, Oden's father, in Amigasa Village. I'm assuming he's still out there in Amigasa Village. I don't know, because maybe he'd want to live a quieter life and not be found out by the villagers that, he's still around. And then some of the other characters I potentially could see Yamato running into or having an interaction with is Queen and King in the Udon prison, and then those are kind of all the characters I think. But let me know what type of interactions Yamato might have throughout her travels as she goes to enshrine Yasui's sword. Okay, so actually starting the chapter review. So the way I'm going to group the 3 main affiliations and their perspectives is, first I'll talk about the Straw Hats, their actions, and their various perspectives. Straw Hats and their affiliates. Second, the world government and their associated affiliates. And then lastly, I'll touch on some of the miscellaneous affiliates that don't exactly fit into those 2 groups. For the Straw Hats, first, let's list some of the affiliates that we see. We see, of course, Water 7 affiliates, Fishman Island. I believe we see Alabasta, Longling Road, Sol, and then Chow Chow from Orange Town. Water 7 and Fishman Island, I think, are 2 of the more important reactions that we get. These groups are in a much better position to mitigate the future biblical event. Of course, Water 7 is already kind of taking some proactive measures to mitigate rising sea levels, so naturally after this message is completed, they probably will kind of expand their efforts to be a little bit more accommodating of more areas than just Water 7. Second, we have Fishman Island. Of course, they have the NOAA, and however that gets built is TBD, but I do think after hearing VegaPunk essentially name Joy Boy, they'll be able to tie 2 and 2 together, or be a little bit more incentivized to take some actions to help mitigate the biblical event that occurs. Outside of that, I think the pan to Alabasta is not too telling, as well as Longling Road. Longling Ring Road just seems to be impacted by the rise in sea level. But what I do think is pretty interesting is the pan to Orange Town, where we have the little girl and Chow Chow, with the little girl talking about the 20 kings who created the world. I think this question, her asking, does VegaPunk know about the 20 kings, that essentially tells us what the rest of VegaPunk's message should entail. It's going to be the truth on the 20 kings and their dynamic with the ancient kingdom, Of course, starting with Joy Boy coming from the ancient clan kingdom, but revealing that truth is, or somewhat of the facts around that nature, is most likely going to be the remainder of VegaPunk's message. I don't think we're going to get too much information on Mew Sama as it relates to revealing his identity, but the actions that overtook the ancient kingdom, as hinted earlier in Egghead Island, we'll probably get more insight and information into that. Having said that, as it relates to some of the actions of the Straw Hats, we get essentially confirmation on how the Straw Hats are going to be escaping the island. So Edison was able to make the clouds stretch, so the party that will take the Sunny is able to either coupe de burst or escape right into the ocean thanks to the outstretched island. I think that's important because essentially how I'm looking at the conclusion of Egghead is basically the closer the Straw Hats get to escaping the island, the closer we get to the end of the message. That just naturally makes sense. That as soon as they go, or as soon as they're ready to go, the message is going to either be interrupted or concluded. So, segueing now into the second group, which is the world government affiliates. In this group we have the Marines, the Celestial Dragons, and then the Gorose and York. It's interesting because starting with the Marines, they seem to be the most doubtful of the information that they're hearing and are almost the least incentivized to take actions to prevent the biblical event that's going to happen. Mostly because, of their current conflict with VegaPunk. However, it is interesting to note Sakazuki, it's only ... but those ... they're kind of interesting because it makes you wonder, do the admirals and the fleet admirals know about Mew? I'm starting to think no, they don't exactly know about Mew, because Sakazuki's character I just don't see with aligning with one absolute ruler and kind of following their will to that extent, and it almost seems as if he's kind of starting to put a couple dots together, about why they had to go and destroy Ohara, why the Celestial Dragons are so high up, and I think ultimately Sakazuki is going to be in store for kind of a retribution arc, and I couldn't help but think about Groudon and Kyogre. You have rising sea level, and then you have the Magma Man. Naturally two opposing forces, so I thought that was pretty interesting. And then from there we have the Celestial Dragons. I thought it was very interesting. I believe it is Saint Shalria is how you pronounce it, but Charlos' sister. This perspective was pretty fascinating because on one hand you have the masses of the world who know the Void Century as the Void Century, whereas on the other hand you have the Celestial Dragons, where I'm sure they were fed a different batch of lies, but ultimately it seems like no one really knows the true truth besides the Gorose and Mew. So I'm curious to see how the continued information could potentially sway Saint Shalria. I thought that was a very interesting reaction that Oda was able to share with us. And then from there we have, of course, the Gorose and York. The Gorose, obviously, they know almost everything that VegaPunk is saying to be true. So the sense of urgency behind their actions continues to rise. At this point, their main goal is to protect York, the Mother Flame, and the Seraphim, I think, maybe. But other than that, they are at the point now where they just want to eradicate everything on the island. Doesn't matter who, what, where, why. If you're not York or the Mother Flame, you're expendable. Of course, naturally, that leads us to the Mother Flame. One question I have is, what color do you guys think the Mother Flame is? Is it red and orange like you would imagine typical fire, or even a sun, or is it white? I don't know why, but when I saw that flame, that just reminded me of Luffy going Gear 5 and, kind of how his hair looks. So I have a feeling a good way to distinguish this flame from other flames is to make it white. And even if you notice, if you watch the anime, when Luffy kind of touches things and affects them, they turn white, when he bends them and stuff. So I have a feeling that this flame is actually white. And as I was reading it, it kind of, the way that the flame was actually drawn with the gloves and being inside a tank of water, it almost seems like it's alive, which is pretty interesting. But and then from there, we kind of have various other miscellaneous pains to different stakeholders and their perspectives. We have Aokiji kind of mulling over the information, sleeper agent, what are his future actions? That's still TBD. You have Smoothie and Mondor reacting. Are we ever going to get confirmation of Big Mom and Kaido? I mean, Big Mom has to be alive, I think, just because of Zeus still being around. We saw Zeus in action in this chapter, zapping Saturn, which, by the way, I think that was a pretty cool action panel. Lilith had a pretty cool pose in that. But yeah, are we going to get confirmation of Big Mom and Kaido? Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, you get those kind of reactions. Their reason to believe VegaPunk's message is based off of his predictions of the earthquake and that it's not going to be natural. And I think this kind of plants seeds for miscellaneous factions rebelling against the government, because if it's not a natural phenomenon but VegaPunk was able to predict it, who could do it, or why would someone do it? Sure, the government will probably try to blame it on the pirates, but eventually it'll all come full circle and people will realize that it was the government that did that. And that also leads me to another question. So we get specific metrics on the sea level rising 1 meter, and that would only take about 5 meters to sink almost the whole world. So does that mean that the weapon, which I'm assuming is Ernest, but the weapon that was used to evaporate Leluzia Kingdom can only be used 5 more times, right? Does that mean that that thing has 5 more shots until the water level is that high? Or does that mean Mew has other means to raise the sea level? I think it's a combination of both. I don't see that Ernest being used to wipe out 5 more specific islands, but I do see it being used again. And then Mew having like a special ability to somewhat control or influence the water, I think makes sense. So outside of that, obviously we have to touch on the lore that VegaPunk dropped on us, pretty much being about the ancient kingdom. It's interesting. I think this chapter, because of all the different perspectives, it feels like a lot's going on, but from the content of the actual message, like, we barely got anything. All we really got was confirmation that Joy Boy was from the ancient kingdom. That's it. Oda was able to do a lot with a little, in a sense, but a lot of questions that come out of that. So I think the next big information in terms of lore is confirmation of the D clan and what that means. It almost has to mean that the ancient kingdom is the D clan, because those are their ancient enemies. The ancient kingdom was their ancient enemies. Joy Boy, most likely a D clan. This supports the statement from Katarina Devon about Blackbeard being special. So I do think that the D clan is from the ancient kingdom. That's pretty much the next confirmation that we need regarding the D moniker in the ancient kingdom. Joy Boy being the first pirate. I think the concept of a pirate is a way to describe his actions, but ultimately those actions that Joy Boy took, I think, aligns with the ideology, right? All about the unification. You know, Joy Boy leaving the ancient kingdom, being the first one to set out to sea, visiting all these different nations, and probably inspiring them to come together and unity and, you know, that dangerous ideology. That would all make sense, and we could probably take the events of what's going on now with Luffy as a replay of events that happened with Joy Boy. So I'm excited to see where the message goes. I don't think we'll have much more. I'll be surprised if we get 2 more chapters of content. I think in terms of the message, I think the next chapter will get more actual facts from VegaPunk. And it's important to keep in mind, everything he gives us is going to be science-based. So he's only going to tell us what he absolutely knows. He's not going to do all the headcanon stuff that we do. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that will entail, but I'm excited to see. Let me know what you guys thought about the chapter. And until next time, Taito out.